So, I know I've already made a set of 2 videos going into detail about all of the editing shenanigans in Girls Planet 999, but one thing I'd really like to do for each survival show I look at is have a shorter companion video. The purpose of this is that the longer video goes into detail about how the editing painted specific people in specific ways in specific moments, while the shorter video will focus on how the trainees who made the final group were rigged in, or an attempt was made to rig them in, and how the trainees that didn't make the group were rigged out. My Island 2 video was a proof of concept for this, although it obviously lacks the longer look at the overall series, and looked exclusively at the members of ISNA, and I didn't really mention the other trainees on the show who were rigged out. So, although I do plan to rework that video once I take a longer look at Island 2, I think it was a good example of what I'd like to discuss in this video, and people seemed to mostly like it, so that was good. Now, Island 2 may have been, in academic terms, mega rigged in terms of the structure of the show and the presence of producer picks, and other shows like Produce 48 and Produce X101 may have been mega rigged in terms of vote manipulation, but we also need to remember that every single show, regardless of how transparent it may seem, GP999, is rigged or has attempted rigging in some way, whether that be through editing, show structure, vote structure, etc. So let's discuss it. In this video, I'll give a very brief overview of what GP999 is, for those of you who may somehow not know what it is, and will give a very brief description of why I want to make these kinds of videos. Since this, predictably, ended up being too long, I've split it into 2 minisodes again. In this one, I'll discuss the first mission of the show up to the first elimination, and in the next part I'll discuss the rest of the show and the consequences of the Riggory, whether it was successful, the consequences for Kepler, etc. Because I know that even my minisodes tend to be long, but I refuse to have them be over 50 minutes. This must be achieved at all costs. In these videos, I'll discuss the structural and, to some extent, editing decisions which were made throughout in an attempt to gain Mnet's favoured, or one of their favoured, lineups. I have mentioned some of these systematic issues briefly in my GP999 videos, but I'll go into them in more depth in this video, or more like I'll try to focus largely on the structural aspects of the show, as opposed to editing and specific moments. This was something I kind of did with the Island video. I focused on how the structure of the show was advantageous for the ISNA members, but in this video I'll focus on how the structure of Girls Planet was advantageous for some and disadvantageous for others. I'll also try to give insight into Mnet's potential thoughts at each step of the show, as in, why were they making these sweeping structural and editing choices? I'll be real with you, there will be some repetitive content in these ones. I debated whether I wanted to make this video or not, but I think it will be useful to have a more condensed understanding of the structure of the show and how it treats different trainees, since, as I said, the purpose of the Island video was to focus more on structural decisions than editing ones. I'll try to make this as different content-wise from the original videos as possible. As far as trigger warnings for this video, well, xenophobia and racism will be mentioned, although probably briefly, and I will be discussing the various aspects of Mnet survival shows and their treatment of trainees, including harsh conditions, excessively long work hours, and emotional manipulation. Lovely. Alright, let's get into it. Girls Planet 999 was an Mnet K-pop survival show which ran from August to October 2021. It featured 99 girls, 33 each from Korean, Chinese and Japanese backgrounds, who competed for a spot in the final group. The final group, Kepler, was formed during the finale on October 22nd, 2021, and the final lineup was made up of Chaehyun, Bahie, Yujin, Daeon, Youngin, Yeso, Hikaru, Mashiro and Xiaoting. If you've spent even a few seconds on my channel, you should know that this was a controversial lineup. Now, what is more important to know about Girls Planet in terms of this minisode is that Girls Planet was the first Mnet survival show, as in, to create a group, not something like Kingdom, that had run since Produce 101 ended in disaster in 2019. With the formation of X1, fans became suspicious and uncovered vote rigging present in both Produce X101 and Produce 48, the previous season which had created Eyes 1. The following legal drama also revealed rigging in the first season and IOI and the second season and 101, although those two groups had already disbanded, so there was arguably less anger towards them, and we aren't 100% sure if this riggery was in terms of the final group as well, or just earlier rounds of voting. So, Produce took a 2-year hiatus. The 4th season finished in 2019 and Mnet were in the doghouse. But we know Mnet, they don't just give up on their publicity stunts. Hence, in January and February 2021, auditions were held for Mnet's new survival show venture, Girls Planet 999, a show that was basically Produce but rebranded and with a few curveballs, like the reintroduction of global fan base voting and the introduction of the cell system, which was doomed to never return again. All of these measures were designed to 1. Make Girls Planet look less like Produce and thus reduce suspicion towards Mnet, and 2. To rig things. We can probably assume that the things that were kept for Boys Planet were the things that Mnet was satisfied with, either in terms of image or in terms of riggery. For instance, the cells weren't really successful, so they were dumped, but both the different country groups and the 50% international versus 50% Korean vote weighting were kept, and were presumably, or in my opinion obviously, useful for rigging. The fact that Girls Planet was the first season of one of these Produce-style shows run by Mnet in Korea after this rigging scandal meant that it is, as I've said before, the ugly duckling of the Produce franchise, and also had a big impact on the ways in which the show was rigged. For instance, they had to be uber transparent about voting systems for fear that anyone would suspect riggery. So we'll get into the actual show in a moment, but for now, let's quickly discuss. Why this minisode? My Island 2 video goes into more depth on the reasons why I want to create this kind of video, so I won't repeat myself too much, but basically a lot of survival shows experience a cycle where new fans come in, are naive and are hurt by how horrid these shows are, and then swear off survival shows or watch them through a more cynical lens, making them less likely to fall for Mnet or another company's editing, while also making them less likely to be super invested in the show and support the final group. In an ideal scenario, Mnet wants as many members of their audience as possible to be young, first-time survival show viewers, because those people are less likely to have had life experience and a critical thinking education which would lead them to question the editing or structure of the show. This makes it easier for Mnet to manipulate them and their votes, and to get them invested and thus to get engagement and hopefully money. Mnet brings in this audience in 2 ways. First, through creating lots of the same parasocial content that fully fledged idol groups do. Timed challenges, member introductions, and variety segments, which flood us with so much content that only people who have more time on their hands, thus tending to be younger, will be able to watch everything and get more invested. They also frame these shows in a very naive way. They're all about the trainees' dreams, and they're soft and hopeful in tone and aesthetic. For instance, Girls Planet uses cute high school-inspired uniforms and a pastel colour palette, and consistently references how important the girls' dreams are, and how they're chasing their dreams, and aren't the dreams of the girls, not women, girls, so cute and worth protecting? All of these strategies are designed to draw in younger fans who have the time to watch and get invested in the show, and who often have at least one contestant their age to feel attached to. And with an audience largely made up of young, naive, first-time viewers, but also many viewers who just don't care that much or otherwise don't want to think too deeply about a guilty pleasure show, Mnet are able to consistently manipulate their audience and achieve their desired outcomes. Hence, the reason for making these videos, as I stated in my Island 2 video, is similar to the purpose of the rest of this channel, to try and show people how companies will manipulate them, and to take a look at the psychological reasons behind and effects of the manipulation. Hence, to try and encourage critical thinking, in this case around survival shows. But once you start thinking critically about survival shows, you'll slowly start thinking critically more and more throughout the rest of your life. And if even one person becomes a better critical thinker because of my channel, I'll be a happy camper. Let me know if that's you in the comments. So, what about the Riggory of Girls Planet 999? Okay, let's start with something general, which I want you to keep in mind as being a very important, but often under-considered aspect of Riggory on this show. The fact that Mnet decided to make this ostensibly a multi-language, multi-nationality show. Now, I say ostensibly because everything was rigged against the non-Korean trainees from the start. Let me explain. So first, a trainee from Japan or a Chinese-speaking country has to leave their family and home country, travel overseas in the middle of the pandemic, and become part of a show in a language they may not fully understand, or may only know a few words in. Now, Mnet apparently said there would be translators available 24/7, but it seems like there weren't from what the twins have said. This instantly means that the Japanese and Chinese trainees have less support, both from their families and from their staff, and will have a far harder time understanding the structure of the show, understanding the tasks given to them, and communicating with both staff and other contestants. This is bad enough. The language barrier and added emotional instability this could well have caused would have been enough to make non-Korean trainees perform worse than their Korean counterparts on average. But on top of this, Mnet pairs up a Chinese trainee, a Japanese trainee, and a Korean trainee in a trio, outwardly calling this a form of connection and teamwork when it actually would create more division and conflict, while leading to more struggles. If all of the Chinese contestants were in one team, all of the Japanese contestants were in another, and all of the Korean trainees were in a third, the Chinese and Japanese contestants would still be at a disadvantage because of all of the issues I mentioned above, like having language barriers which would affect their ability to understand instructions and the feedback of the mentors. But these advantages would have been minor compared to the added disadvantage they had of communication difficulties with their own teammates, which is what happened in the actual show. As I mentioned in my Girls Planet videos, we often saw Japanese and Chinese trainees struggling to understand instructions, or things their teammates said. This allowed Mnet to edit them as incompetent, unintelligent, or evil depending on the person, and allowed them to portray the Korean contestants as more intelligent, confident, and capable, as well as selfless for helping their teammates. This meant that one's Korean knowledge would kind of enforce natural selection onto the contestants. Those who understood Korean less would have a harder time, therefore would be likely to have had worse performances, therefore would be edited poorly and viewed negatively by fans, therefore would have been eliminated. You can literally see this in both Kepler and in the progressive eliminations of the show. The international trainees who seemed to have the most language issues were culled quickly, whether it be through invisibility, poor performances, or evil editing. This allowed Mnet to create the appearance of a multinational show, multinationalism being something that distanced it from produce and gave it a fresh image, while ensuring that they'd have more Korean contestants than Chinese and Japanese combined in the final group. Speaking of the global voting, while international viewers had been able to vote in Produce 101 Season 1, this was restricted to Korean viewers only for later seasons. But Girls Planet, as I've said many times, had to distance itself from Produce, and K-pop had exploded since 2016, so they brought back international voters, with a catch. The votes would be weighted 50% Korean and 50% international. This meant that, as I discussed in episodes 10 and 11, there were occasions where a Korean vote weighed possibly as much as 10 times an international vote. International votes including both China and Japan, by the way. This was another way the odds were stacked against global contestants, since Korean audiences massively prefer Korean trainees. The final Korean lineup only included one non-Korean trainee, Hiklu, in rank 9. This is probably due to a combination of language preferences, the strained history between the three countries, nationalism, and Mnet's editing, which privileged Korean trainees. But regardless, the point is that by making the vote ratio 50-50, Mnet rigged the competition in favour of Korean trainees and firmly against Chinese trainees especially. This has worked very well for them, so they've continued to use it both for Boys Planet and for Island 2. I'm actually recording this before Boys 2 Planet starts, but I have zero doubt they will continue to use it for that as well. Next, the general pressure and stress of being on the show. This affects all trainees, although like I said earlier, Japanese and Chinese trainees probably lacked the added support system of the Korean ones, so would have had it somewhat worse. Regardless, survival shows are horrible. Filming takes forever, there's little in the way of food, water, and sleep on set. There's the constant stress of evaluations, interpersonal conflicts, feedback, and the vote rankings and eliminations. Elimination episodes are almost certainly mega traumatic for trainees. I don't want to sound like blasé about this, but seriously, mega traumatic. Especially for those on the border of elimination and survival, who Mnet plays around with to get extreme reactions out of, and who probably sit around questioning their lives afterwards. Dion is a great example of Mnet playing with people's feelings, even though she wasn't on the border of elimination outside of that one teaser Mnet gave before the second elimination round. I discussed in detail in my Girls Planet videos how Dion was emotionally and psychologically manipulated by the producers of the show, who tore her down and kept her down, making her question her skill and losing confidence, before telling her that it was all just part of her plan, hence they'd been mean to her for no reason. Then they rigged her in via revealing her rank before the second elimination, aired the segment at her parents' place, and didn't protect her from any of the hate that came afterwards. Horrible, especially considering she was only 17 at the time. Basically, the stress of these shows and the producer manipulation obviously leads to trauma, and we know from other reality shows that it can lead people to lash out or act strangely, which gives editors the perfect opportunity to evil edit people. And who is the most stressed? Who is more likely to break and be evil edited? The foreign trainees, of course, the ones Mnet doesn't want in the group. Speaking of, if you've seen any of my previous videos about survival shows, you should know that editing does a lot, whether that be positive editing, negative editing, or omission from the show entirely. Omission being the most effective tactic to get a trainee out. If no one knows you exist, how can they vote for you? I also discussed in my Island 2 video and Girls Planet videos how Mnet uses partially revealed interim ranks to manipulate votes. If they want someone in, they'll show them below the cutoff, making people panic vote for them. If they want someone out, they'll show them above the cutoff, making people more complacent and their rank likely to fall. The exception to this rule is when they show someone who has typically been rank 1 suddenly lower. Even if that person is still in the group cutoff, people will want them to be rank 1. Some people they've rigged people to panic vote for include Dion before the second elimination, and Xiaoting and other foreign trainees in the finale of the show, as well as Coco on the finale of Island 2 and Tere in the finale of Boys Planet. Some people they've shown at high ranks and have therefore attempted to rig out include Sujung several times on Island 2, and probably people like Bahie and Richie on Girls Planet in the finale. Finally, they've tried to rig both Hanbin on Boys Planet and Jimin on Girls Planet into rank 1 by showing them shockingly not in first place before the finale. Unfortunately for Mnet, both Junghao and Jungin were too powerful. Despite the fact that audiences are aware of these tactics, they still have an effect, every single time. From Mnet's perspective, the ranks don't even have to be real. No one's checking the interim vote counts for Riggory and Lies, only the final ones, so they have free reign there. Alright, let's talk about the actual show itself. Starting with the Signal Song rankings. This was another way Girls Planet distanced itself from produce, and is one way the producers attempted to gain more control of a show that they could no longer vote rig. Similarly to the interim ranks, these can be botched as Mnet sees fit. If they like a trainee, they can put her at the top ranking-wise. If they don't like her, they can put her at the bottom. Alternatively, they can put people they do like at lower ranks than they should be so they can rise. Ahem, Chaehyun. Or they can put a girl they like at a high rank only for her to fall and have a redemption. Ahem, Dion. Mnet knows with the power of common sense that trainees with higher ranks will get more attention, so they can fill these ranks with trainees they like more. Hence they do. Almost all of the members of Kepler started in the top half of the rankings. Only Chaehyun and Bahie started lower, and Youngin was on the border. No one thinks it's strange when people with high ranks get screen time and positive feedback and then make it into the group after all. This also extends to Mnet picking the signal song centers. By choosing Dion, Hiklu, and Xiaoting, they declare that they want these 3 trainees in the group, and that this is the kind of concept they want the group to have, aka dance heavy. Speaking of these rankings and Mnet's manipulation in general, from all knowledge we have, it seems that Mnet picked the members, the songs, and the styling for the demo stages. I discussed this in more depth in my Girls Planet videos, but this let them do things like put Dion with a concept that suited her and with teammates who could keep up with her, while putting Hikaru and especially Xiaoting with trainees they far outshone. This allowed Mnet to perpetuate the narrative that Dion wasn't as much of a showstopper as Xiaoting and Hikaru, and thus to justify not making her a top 9 member, even though she did just as well or possibly even better than them. Through styling, member choice, and song choice, as well as choosing the order groups performed in, Mnet could essentially decide the outcome of every single stage. Whether a certain member stood out or suited the concept, whether a group was rested and stable or tired and unstable, Rip Zian, whether a group looked good, Urina's group, or cheap, Bahie's group, and so on. The demo stages are arguably the single most important moment of the show, because they introduce the trainees to the audience, and a trainee's performance in a demo stage dictates 1. Whether people notice them, 2. Whether people like them and vote for them, and 3. Their storyline on the show. Most stories on the show, whether they be good or bad, start at the demo stage, and this is where Mnet sets up everything they want to do for the rest of the season. For instance, the demo stage is where they uplift Yeso, Xiaoting, Hikaru, and Youngin, and is where they shove down trainees like Dion. It's also where they set up emotional conflicts and sad backstories like Yujin's, and is where they set up other trainees for later failure like Chai Bing. If Chai Bing had started high in the rankings, then randomly fallen at the end, it would have been fine. But by complimenting her so much in the first episode after she was given a low signal song rank, they bring her up, and give the audience confidence that they like her, and that she's a good performer. This makes her apparent about face in Salute even more horrible. Basically, they artificially give her further to fall. The same concept applies to Dion. If she wasn't rank 1 and thus didn't have so far to fall, her storyline wouldn't have had the same impact and wouldn't have endeared so many fans to her. I also shouldn't need to tell you why it's borderline Riggory for Mnet in the demo stage, which presents trainees to the audience for the first time, to pick songs that suit some trainees and songs that really poorly suit other trainees. In an ideal scenario, every trainee would pick their own song and they'd form their own groups, but we know that's never happening. Mnet likes their control. Moving on to the cells. As I mentioned earlier, the cells make life harder for everyone, but especially the Chinese and Japanese trainees. You may be surprised to hear me say this since I'm a public lover of the cells, but the thing is, I love the cells for the concept of 3 girls who need to connect and work together, live together or die together, but just because I like the concept doesn't mean they're a good thing Riggory-wise. They perpetuated the language barriers between nationality groups by forcing girls to work under stressful conditions with those they couldn't understand, and the nature of Korean being the language of the show combined with all of the above meant the cells were the perfect system to encourage Koreans to become leaders, main vocalists, and killing parts, hence gaining them more screen time and attention. It also allowed Mnet to ensure that at least a few cells would 1. Have conflict, and 2. Even more specifically, conflict they could edit to create their classic evil Chinese, hero Korean, victim Japanese narrative. This was particularly seen in the first mission, where Korean trainees made up the bulk of the leaders and killing parts. Only 7 non-Korean trainees took these positions in the connection mission, in comparison with 15 Koreans, and only 2 of those non-Koreans were Japanese. Rinka was the killing part for How You Like That Team 2, and Mashiro was the leader for Fiesta Team 1. This reinforces the invisibility of Japanese trainees, and on top of this, most of the Chinese contestants like Yanning and Ruchi were poorly edited. Additionally, out of the 11 main vocalists / top vocal positions in teams, Koreans took 8 spots, with 2 Chinese and 1 Japanese spot. I bring up main vocalists in particular since they often get some of the most lines in the song, and by virtue of having high notes often get a lot of screen time. Now, this may seem like a coincidence, but make no mistake, if Mnet wanted this program to be truly equal, not only would they have provided better support for the international trainees, but they also would have enforced equal numbers for position quotas. The combination of language barriers, the structure of the show including cells, and the editing of the show meant that Koreans were head, shoulders, and even torsos above the rest, through the power of storylines and salience. This is a prime example of how editing and show structure serve a huge role in Riggory, even outside of vote rigging. Like I said, if no one knows who you are, they won't vote for you, will they? This structure, having allotted numbers of trainees from each group per song, thus allowing Korean trainees to shine, is also seen in the second round. They removed it in the third round and later missions. I'll get around to why later. For now, let's talk about the mentoring and team battle system. Girls Planet 999 had no live audience since, COVID. So the mentors decided every winning team. Mnet decided every winning team. There are 3 reasons a team could win in Mnet's eyes. 1, to complete their storyline, and 2, to shock the audience, or 3, because they wanted the trainees in that team to get the benefit. Let's discuss each of the teams and why they won. Yes or Yes Team 1 won to continue their storyline, and especially to continue Chaehyun's redemption arc after her voice crack in the demo stage. Also, having Team 2 lose shows how little Mnet likes Seiyin, and would have allowed them to give Doa and Wonjae, 2 trainees they don't necessarily want in the final group but do kind of like, an underdog arc in the next round. How You Like That Team 1 won because this allows Mnet to continue Yujin and Xiaoting's storylines, and because the team has many trainees they like Youngin, Yurina, Yujin and Xiaoting. Also, by raising Chai Bing up, they know they will be able to make her fall further if they get a chance to evil edit her later, which they do. Also, Dion is on Team 2, so this will add to her underdog arc. Her losing here is essential for her storyline. Gia is also on Team 2, so Mnet knows that if she gets eliminated, they can give her the planet pass and a redemption arc in the next round, which they kind of do. Fiesta Team 1 wins because they have more trainees Mnet likes, namely Mashiro, Yeyoung, and Yeso. Team 2 doesn't have anyone they want except maybe Miyu, so it's an easy choice for them. The 5th season Team 1 won because Mnet likes Manami and Bora, and to continue and reinforce Ryan's storyline. I think they wanted to give Ryan an underdog redemption arc in the next round, but she didn't survive, and they didn't want her that much, so they didn't give her the planet pass. Finally, Pretty You Team won the EBS matchup for 2 reasons. First, to highlight Kotane, Ran, and Maya, who Mnet like enough to get onto the next round, and to create a shock for both the audience and other contestants when the Eve team, stacked with trainees like Jiyoon, Yanning, Shana, Hikaru, Ruchi, and Suyeon, loses. Mnet likes the Eve trainees, and they know they're popular enough to survive, so they can sit back and let them lose, so they have to redeem themselves in the next mission, and also to create an underdog surprise storyline for Pretty You team. Again, the ability to choose the winning team, lets Mnet give an advantage, both numerical and in terms of storyline and screen time, to the trainees they like. far more predictable than audience votes. I want you to note that once audiences were brought back into the picture on Boys Planet, the groups were K versus G. Mnet knowing that K trainees would get more votes and win. See, everything is planned, nothing is random. After Mnet decide whose mistakes or good moments they show, who to give good and bad feedback to, and who wins, aka getting screen time and the benefit, we get to the first elimination where we see the effect of the cells and of the editing. Now, the cells allow Mnet to 1. Distance themselves from produce with an ostensibly multinational show, and 2. Privilege Korean trainees, but they do come with the added uncertainty of some people they like just not getting enough cell votes, hence why they removed the cells in Boys Planet. However, Mnet aren't stupid enough to leave themselves with no control. If their editing and other manipulations fail, they can provide interim rankings, and if even that doesn't work, which honestly is unlikely, they can use the Planet Pass, in which the mentors become the mouthpiece of the producers. This allows them to save trainees they like. Duh. In round 1, they save Ran, Wonjae, and Hyerim, all of whom they like, but none of whom they actually want in the final group. They probably want all of them in the top 28 or 18 though. So with that, we've passed the first elimination and reached the end of this minisode. Let's wrap it up. I find survival shows and the culture around them very interesting, and I find it especially interesting how many people, including myself, seem to lose brain cells while watching these shows. This, as a psychology student, makes me ask why, hence my unfortunate fascination with survival shows, the reason probably most of my audience are here. Survival show culture frustrates me because time and time again people fall for the same tricks, despite swearing off survival shows previously. Already we can see it running rampant in Boys 2 Planet spaces, namely people speculating about final lineups before the show even begins, a classic way to make incorrect predictions. The frustration of watching things like this and rigged shows like these has led me to create all of the videos I've made about survival shows, with the goal of educating people about the various tactics, both subtle and obvious, that these companies use. Hence these minisodes. In this minisode, I've discussed the background of Girls Planet and the purpose of these companion videos to my longer videos exploring survival shows, and have considered the various aspects of Riggory which Mnet have employed in the concept of the show itself, i.e. the different planets for different nationalities, and the first mission of the show, which also includes not so fun things like Mnet literally deciding which teams get the benefit based on who they like. In part 2, which I'll release at the same time as this one, I'll discuss the rest of the show and the consequences of the Riggory, both in terms of how many people Mnet got where they wanted them and in terms of Kepler's members, Island 2 style. So that concludes this minisode. Thanks for watching, I hope you learned something, and I'll see you in the next one.